Commander Zethkar of the Hegemony Fleet stared at the tactical display with growing unease. The human colony of New Terra hung before them like a ripe fruit, defended by nothing more than 3 outdated frigates and a handful of mining vessels. According to every military doctrine in the galaxy, this should have been over in minutes. That was 6 hours ago. "Status report," Zethkar growled, his forearms flexing with irritation. The bridge of the Dreadnought times Voidrender times hummed with activity as his crew scrambled to make sense of what they were witnessing. "Sir, we've lost another destroyer," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Vex Mola. "The humans are using some kind of improvised weaponry. They're turning their industrial equipment against us." Zethkar's compound eyes narrowed. The Hegemony had conquered 47 worlds in the past decade. They were experts at orbital bombardment, fleet engagements, and ground assault. They had never encountered anything like this. The humans weren't fighting like any civilized species should fight. They weren't following established protocols of war. Instead, they were doing something that defied every military textbook in the known galaxy. They were being creative. "Show me," Zethkar commanded. The main screen flickered to life, displaying the battle in real time. What Zethkar saw made his blood run cold. The human mining ships had somehow jury-rigged their industrial lasers into weapons. They were using their cargo haulers as improvised missiles, loading them with explosives and ramming them into hegemony vessels at impossible angles. Most disturbing of all, they were coordinating their attacks in ways that seemed to ignore every principle of space combat. "They're using their asteroid mining charges as proximity mines," Vex Mola continued, her voice betraying her confusion. "And, sir, they've somehow turned their orbital refineries into long-range artillery platforms." A new alarm blared across the bridge. On the screen, another hegemony cruiser erupted in flames as a modified human transport vessel, loaded with mining explosives, detonated against its hull. The explosion was massive, far larger than anything a transport ship should have been capable of producing. "Impossible," Zethkar muttered. "No species fights this way. It's completely illogical." But even as he said it, he realized that was exactly the point. The humans weren't following logic. They weren't adhering to the accepted rules of warfare that every other species in the galaxy followed. They were improvising, adapting, and turning everything around them into a weapon. The communications officer suddenly straightened. "Commander! We're receiving a transmission from the human colony." "Put it through." The screen shifted to show a human female, middle-aged with graying hair and tired eyes. She wore what appeared to be civilian mining gear, not military uniform. Behind her, Zethkar could see other humans working frantically on what looked like construction equipment. "I am Administrator Sarah Chen of New Terra Colony," the human said, her voice steady despite the chaos visible behind her. "I believe you wanted to surrender." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Surrender? We are the Hegemony Fleet. We have come to claim this world for the Empire." Sarah Chen smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Zethkar's skin crawl. "Commander, you've just lost 4 ships to a mining colony with no military infrastructure. Our actual military hasn't even arrived yet." "What are you talking about?" Zethkar demanded. "The UN Prometheus and her battle group will be here in 12 hours, Chen replied calmly. "We're just civilians with mining equipment. But here's the thing about humans, Commander. We don't think inside boxes. We don't follow your rules. And we sure as hell don't give up." The transmission cut off, leaving Zethkar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. In all their campaigns, they had never encountered anything like this. Species either fought with military precision or surrendered. They didn't turn their entire civilization into an improvised weapons platform. "Sir," the tactical officer called out urgently, "the humans are launching something new." On the display, dozens of objects were streaming up from New Terra's surface. They moved erratically, not following any recognizable flight pattern. As they drew closer, Zethkar realized what he was seeing. "Are those construction mechs?" he asked incredulously. "Yes, sir. But they've been modified. The humans have attached rocket boosters to their mining mechs, and loaded them with industrial explosives. They're using them as guided missiles. Zethkar watched in growing horror as the modified construction mechs swarmed toward his fleet. They moved like no military vessel he had ever seen, zigzagging and spinning, impossible to track with conventional targeting systems. When the first one reached a hegemony destroyer, it latched onto the hull with its industrial claws and detonated. The destroyer vanished in a ball of flame. "This is insane," Vexmola whispered. "They're turning their entire colony into a weapon." And that's when Zethkar realized the true horror of what they were facing. The humans weren't just defending their colony. They were demonstrating something far more terrifying. They were showing that they could turn anything, anywhere, into a means of warfare. Every human world, every human settlement, every piece of human technology was potentially a weapon waiting to be unleashed. "Commander," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving multiple emergency signals from across the sector. Other hegemony fleets are reporting similar irregularities in their campaigns against human worlds." Zethkar's blood turned to ice. "Show me." The tactical display expanded to show the entire sector. Red warning indicators were flashing across dozens of star systems where hegemony forces had engaged human settlements. In every case, the same pattern was emerging. Human civilians were fighting back with improvised weapons, turning their everyday technology into instruments of war. On Kepler Station, humans had turned their particle accelerator research facility into a planet-killing weapon. On New Shanghai, they had somehow weaponized their weather control systems, creating storms that grounded entire hegemony air fleets. On Europa Base, they had used their terraforming equipment to create artificial earthquakes that swallowed hegemony ground forces whole. "By the Ancient Ones," Zethkar breathed. "They're not just defending themselves. They're teaching us something." "Sir?" Vexmola asked. "They're showing us that there's no such thing as a civilian target when humans are involved. Every human world, every human settlement, is potentially a military nightmare waiting to happen. They don't separate their civilian and military infrastructure because they don't think that way." On the screen, another wave of modified mining equipment rose from New Terra's surface. This time, the humans had somehow turned their atmospheric processors into massive railguns. The projectiles they fired weren't sophisticated missiles or energy weapons. They were chunks of refined metal, accelerated to incredible speeds by machinery designed to purify air. And they were devastatingly effective. Another hegemony cruiser exploded as a piece of processed ore, traveling at near light speed, punched through its hull like it was made of paper. The humans were literally throwing rocks at them, but they were doing it with such precision and force that it was more effective than most military weapons. "Commander," the tactical officer called out, his voice tight with panic. "The humans are doing something new. They're moving the entire asteroid field." Zethkar looked at the display and felt his heart stop. The humans had somehow attached their mining equipment to several large asteroids and were slowly pushing them toward the hegemony fleet. It would take hours for the asteroids to reach them. But when they did, the impact would be catastrophic. The humans weren't just improvising weapons. They were reshaping the battlefield itself. "Pull back," Zethkar ordered quietly. "Sir?" Vexmola asked in disbelief. "I said pull back, get us out of range of those asteroids, and send a priority message to High Command. Tell them we need to completely reevaluate our approach to human warfare." As the hegemony fleet began its withdrawal, Zethkar stared at the image of New Terra on his screen. The human colony looked peaceful from this distance, its cities glowing softly in the darkness of space, but he knew now that this peaceful appearance was an illusion. Every human world was a fortress. Every human civilian was a potential warrior. Every piece of human technology was a weapon waiting to be deployed. The humans had just taught the galaxy a lesson that would change the nature of warfare forever. The age of conventional military thinking was over. The humans had seen to that. Admiral Crixtel of the Hegemony High Command had lived through 300 years of conquest. She had seen worlds burn, entire species kneel before the might of the hegemony war machine and the expansion of their empire across half the galaxy. Never in all those centuries had she received reports like the ones flooding her command center today. Explain this to me again, she demanded, her 6 arms gesturing at the holographic display that showed disaster reports from across human space. How does a species with no military tradition defeat 7 of our battle fleets? Fleet Commander Zethkar stood before her, his proud bearing diminished by the defeat at New Terra. Around the command chamber, other fleet commanders who had engaged human forces wore similar expressions of confusion and dismay. Admiral, the humans don't fight like any species we've encountered, Zethkar began. They don't separate military and civilian infrastructure. Every settlement, every colony, every space station is potentially a weapons platform. Admiral Crixtel's compound eyes fixed on him with laser intensity. Impossible. No civilization can sustain that level of militarization. It would collapse their economy, their society. That's just it, Admiral, interrupted Commander Velthon, who had led the disastrous assault on Kepler Station. They haven't militarized their society, they've weaponized their technology. There's a difference. The Admiral's mandibles clicked impatiently. Explain. Velthon activated a holographic replay of the Kepler Station engagement. The image showed a peaceful research facility, its particle accelerator ring stretching across several kilometers of space. This is a scientific research station. The humans use it to study subatomic particles, but when we attacked, the replay showed the research station suddenly blazing to life. The particle accelerator, designed to smash atoms together at incredible speeds, had been reconfigured. Instead of tiny particles, it was firing massive bursts of energy directly at the hegemony fleet. They turned a research tool into a planet-killing weapon in less than 4 hours, Velthon continued. Not only that, but they did it using grad students and research assistants. No military personnel involved. Admiral Crixtel studied the display with growing unease. How is this possible? Another commander, Jex Para, stepped forward. Admiral, I think I understand what we're dealing with. The humans don't think in terms of single-purpose technology. Every tool they create has multiple potential applications. They don't see boundaries between civilian and military use because, to them, everything is potentially both. She gestured to another holographic display showing the battle at New Shanghai. Watch this. The humans have weather control systems for terraforming. Standard technology, used by dozens of species. But when we attacked, the display showed massive storms suddenly forming in the planet's atmosphere. Lightning strikes, each one precisely targeted, began striking hegemony aircraft out of the sky. Tornadoes appeared with impossible speed, creating barriers that grounded entire fighter squadrons. They turned their weather into a weapon, Jex Para said quietly. They used systems designed to create gentle rain and pleasant breezes to generate targeted natural disasters. Admiral Crixtel was beginning to understand, and the realization filled her with dread. You're telling me that every human colony is essentially a military base in disguise? Worse than that, Admiral, Zethkar replied. Every human is essentially a potential military engineer. They don't think like us. Where we see a mining laser, they see a potential ship-to-ship weapon. Where we see a cargo hauler, they see a missile platform. Where we see a research station, they see a fortress. The holographic display shifted to show reports from across the galaxy. On Europa Base, humans had used terraforming equipment to create artificial earthquakes that had swallowed entire hegemony ground forces. On Titan Station, they had somehow turned their fusion reactors into improvised nuclear weapons. On New Berlin, they had used their manufacturing robots to create an army of improvised war machines in a matter of hours. The pattern is consistent across all engagements, reported the hegemony's chief military analyst, a thin creature with pale blue skin. Humans take whatever technology is available and find ways to use it for warfare. They don't appear to have any fixed doctrines or standard procedures. Each engagement is completely unique. Admiral Crixtel stared at the reports in growing horror. You're describing a species that treats war like an engineering problem. Oh, exactly, Zethkar said. And they're very good engineers. At that moment, a communication alert chimed through the command center. The holographic display shifted to show an incoming transmission from the human homeworld of Earth. Admiral Crick's tell, came a calm, professional voice. The image showed a human female in what appeared to be civilian clothes, sitting in what looked like an ordinary office. I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, Director of the Human Diplomatic Corps. I believe we need to talk. Admiral Crick's mandibles clicked in surprise. After all the reports of human military improvisation, she had expected to face a grizzled military commander. Instead, she was looking at what appeared to be a university professor. Dr. Vasquez, the Admiral replied carefully. I am Admiral Crick's of the Hegemony High Command. You have surprised us with your defensive capabilities. Dr. Vasquez smiled, and there was something unsettling about the expression. Admiral, what you've seen so far isn't our defensive capabilities. It's just our civilians getting creative under pressure. Our actual military hasn't been involved in any of these engagements. The command center fell silent. Admiral Crick's felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. What do you mean? The colonies you've attacked are civilian settlements, Admiral. Mining operations, research stations, terraforming projects. The people who fought your fleets were miners, scientists, engineers, and farmers. Our military is still mobilizing. On the display behind Dr. Vasquez, Admiral Crick's could see movement. It looked like a massive shipyard. But the vessels under construction didn't match any design in the Hegemony's databases. They seemed to be amalgamations of different technologies, as if someone had taken various human innovations and combined them into something entirely new. You see, Admiral, Dr. Vasquez continued, humans have a particular way of thinking about problems. We don't accept that things have only one purpose or one solution. When you attacked our colonies, you presented our civilians with an engineering challenge. They solved it using the tools they had available. Another display activated, showing what appeared to be a human military academy. But instead of soldiers drilling in formation, it showed humans working with various pieces of equipment, constantly modifying and adapting them for different purposes. Our military trains differently than yours, Dr. Vasquez explained. We don't teach our soldiers to follow predetermined tactics. We teach them to solve problems creatively. Every human soldier is trained as an engineer. Every engineer is trained to think tactically. And every civilian is encouraged to see potential in everything around them. Admiral Crick's was beginning to understand the full scope of what the Hegemony had stumbled into. You're describing a species where every individual is potentially a military asset. That's not quite right, Admiral. Dr. Vasquez corrected gently. We're describing a species where every individual is trained to see solutions where others see problems. Military conflict is just one type of problem. The implications were staggering. The Hegemony had built its empire on the assumption that warfare was a specialized activity, conducted by professional militaries using dedicated equipment. They had never encountered a species where the line between civilian and military capability was so completely blurred. Dr. Vasquez, Admiral Crick's said slowly, what exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that you reconsider your approach to human space, Doctor. Vasquez replied. Because what you've seen so far is just the beginning. Our civilians defended themselves with mining equipment and research tools. Our actual military has been spending the last 72 hours doing what humans do best, which is, Dr. Vasquez's smile widened, solving the problem of how to fight a galactic empire. And Admiral, we've come up with some very creative solutions. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Crick's staring at a blank screen. Around her, the command center was filled with nervous silence. For the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, the Hegemony was facing an enemy they didn't understand. Admiral, Zethkar said quietly, what are your orders? Admiral Crick's looked at the reports scattered across her displays. Every engagement with humans had resulted in defeat, not through superior firepower or tactics, but through sheer unpredictability. The humans fought like no species in the galaxy, turning everything around them into weapons and treating warfare like a puzzle to be solved. Send a message to all fleet commanders, she ordered. Cease all offensive operations against human space immediately. And get me everything we know about human technological capabilities. All of it. Admiral? Velthon asked in confusion. Commander, we've been thinking about this all wrong. We've been treating the humans like just another species to conquer. But they're not. They're something entirely different. They're a species that turns reality itself into a weapon. Admiral Crixtel turned to face her assembled commanders. Gentlemen, we need to completely rethink everything we know about warfare, because the humans have just taught us that the only real limitation in combat is imagination, and they appear to have no limits on that at all. 3 months after the first human engagements, the Hegemony War Council convened for the most important session in their empire's history. Representatives from a dozen conquered species filled the massive chamber, but today they weren't discussing expansion or tribute. They were discussing survival. Admiral Crixtel stood before the assembled delegates, her usually pristine uniform bearing the stress marks of sleepless nights and endless strategic meetings. Behind her, holographic displays showed the current state of hegemony space, now riddled with red zones where human forces had appeared. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. I must report that our empire faces an unprecedented threat, not from superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but from a fundamental difference in how humans approach conflict itself. Delegate Mordoon of the crystalline hierarchy leaned forward, his translucent features reflecting the chamber's lights. Admiral, surely you exaggerate. No single species can threaten an empire that spans 200 worlds. Admiral Crixtel activated the central display. It showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, with hegemony territory marked in blue and human space in green. Over the past 3 months, dozens of green tendrils had appeared throughout hegemony space. Delegate Mordoon, the humans aren't attacking our territory in any conventional sense. They're doing something far worse. They're teaching other species how to fight back. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. For 300 years, the hegemony's greatest strength had been the passive acceptance of most conquered species. Once defeated, most civilizations simply accepted hegemony rule as inevitable. Impossible, declared Delegate Zarkon of the Metallic Clans. The conquered species lack the technology to challenge us. That's exactly what we thought, Admiral Crixtel replied grimly, until the humans showed them that they didn't need advanced technology. They needed advanced thinking. She gestured to the display, which now showed a detailed report from the Kepler sector. 3 weeks ago, the humans made contact with the Velian mining colonies in this sector. The Velians have been under hegemony rule for 50 years. They mine rare metals using simple extraction equipment. The display shifted to show surveillance footage of a Velian mining operation. The Velians were small, insectoid creatures, considered among the most docile of the hegemony's subject species. Watch this, Admiral Crixtel commanded. The footage showed human advisors working alongside Velian miners, but instead of simply extracting metals, they were modifying the mining equipment. Within hours, the simple extraction tools had been transformed into something entirely different. The humans taught them to reconfigure their mining charges into guided explosives, Admiral Crixtel explained. Their ore haulers became missile platforms. Their drilling equipment became precision artillery. In 6 hours, a peaceful mining colony became a fortress that destroyed an entire hegemony patrol fleet. Delegate Mordoon's crystalline structure flickered with agitation. One mining colony cannot threaten the Empire. You're right, Admiral Crixtel agreed. But it's not one colony anymore. The galactic map reappeared, but now it was covered in pulsing red indicators. Each one represented a former hegemony subject world that had learned human techniques and risen in rebellion. The humans aren't just fighting us, Admiral Crixtel continued. They're spreading a philosophy. They're teaching every species that technology has no fixed purpose, that every tool can be reimagined, and that creativity is the ultimate weapon. Commander Zethkar stepped forward to address the assembly. I witnessed this firsthand on New Terra. The humans don't see boundaries between offensive and defensive capabilities. They don't distinguish between military and civilian applications. Everything is potential. Everything can be adapted. Everything can be used. This is madness, Delegate Zarkon protested. No civilization can function that way. There must be specialization. There must be order. That's what makes them so dangerous, Admiral Crixtel replied. They've created a civilization based on adaptability rather than specialization. And now they're teaching that philosophy to every species we've conquered. The display showed the latest intelligence reports. On Vorgan Prime, the conquered Vorgans had used their food processing equipment to create chemical weapons. On Beta Centauri, the enslaved aquatic species had turned their water purification systems into massive pressure cannons. On distant Rigel Station, the subjugated energy beings had learned to weaponize their natural electromagnetic abilities in ways they had never considered before. The pattern is consistent across all affected worlds, reported the hegemony's chief intelligence officer. Human advisors arrive. Assess local technology and capabilities. Then teach the native species to see their equipment in new ways. Within days, peaceful subject worlds become military threats. Delegate Mordoon's structure was now flickering rapidly with distress. How many worlds have been affected? 47 and counting, Admiral Crixtel replied. And the rate is accelerating. The humans aren't just teaching individual species. They're creating networks of knowledge sharing. Species that have never interacted before are now exchanging adaptive techniques and tactical innovations. The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed this information. For centuries, the hegemony had maintained control through technological superiority and the isolation of subject species. The humans were destroying both advantages simultaneously. What do you recommend, Admiral? Asked Delegate Yilsara of the Gaseous Consortium, her voice filtering through translation equipment with obvious strain. Admiral Crixtel took a deep breath. I recommend we negotiate. The chamber erupted in outraged protests. For 3 centuries, the hegemony had never negotiated with inferior species. The very concept was antithetical to their imperial philosophy. Listen to me, Admiral Crixtel shouted over the noise. The humans have fundamentally changed the nature of warfare in this galaxy. They've demonstrated that technological superiority means nothing if your opponents can adapt faster than you can react. She activated a new display showing recent human innovations. In 3 months, they've created weapon systems that combine technologies from dozens of different species. They've developed tactics that use environmental manipulation on a stellar scale. They've built ships that don't follow any recognizable design philosophy because they incorporated improvements from every species they've encountered. The images showed human vessels that seemed to be constructed from pieces of various alien technologies, hegemony sensors, crystalline energy matrices, metallic clan armor plating, Velian mining equipment, all integrated into designs that somehow worked better than their individual components. They're not just adapting to fight us, Admiral Crixtel continued. They're evolving. Every engagement teaches them something new, and they incorporate those lessons instantly. They're creating a military philosophy based on constant innovation. Commander Zethkar added, Admiral, if I may, the humans have shown us something terrifying about ourselves. For 3 centuries, we've conquered species and then prevented them from developing or adapting. We've created an empire of stagnation. The humans are showing our subjects what they could become if they were allowed to grow. Delegate Zarkon's metallic features darkened. Are you suggesting that our conquered species are rising against us because they've been inspired? I'm suggesting that the humans have demonstrated that there's no such thing as a permanently defeated species, Admiral Crixtel replied. Given the right perspective, any technology can be weaponized, any population can become dangerous, and any peaceful world can transform into a military threat. At that moment, a priority communication signal chimed through the chamber. The main display activated to show Dr. Elena Vasquez, the same human diplomat who had spoken to Admiral Crixtel months earlier. Honored delegates of the Hegemony War Council, Dr. Vasquez said, her voice calm and professional. I bring greetings from the newly formed Galactic Cooperative Alliance. Admiral Crixtel felt her heart sink. Galactic Cooperative Alliance? Yes, Admiral. It turns out that when species are allowed to freely share knowledge and technology, they can accomplish remarkable things. 49 former hegemony worlds have joined together to create a new kind of galactic civilization, one based on mutual cooperation rather than imperial domination. The display behind Dr. Vasquez showed images that defied belief. Ships that combined technologies from dozens of species, space stations that seemed to grow like living organisms, and worlds that had been transformed beyond recognition through collaborative terraforming. "We're not here to threaten you, Doctor," Vasquez continued. "We're here to offer you the same choice we've offered everyone else. Join us as equals, or continue fighting a war you cannot win." Delegate Mordoon's structure was now pulsing with rapid, frantic light. "You cannot seriously expect the hegemony to surrender to a collection of inferior species." Dr. Vasquez smiled sadly. "Delegate, that attitude is exactly why you're losing. You still think in terms of superior and inferior. We think in terms of potential and possibility. Every species has capabilities you've never bothered to discover because you were too busy keeping them conquered." She gestured, and the display showed a montage of cooperative projects, crystalline beings working with energy entities to create new forms of power generation, aquatic species collaborating with atmospheric specialists to develop revolutionary environmental technologies, metallic clans sharing their construction techniques with organic civilizations to build impossible structures. "This is what happens when species are allowed to combine their unique abilities freely, Doctor," Vasquez explained. "Innovation accelerates exponentially. Problems that seemed impossible become trivial when you have the right combination of perspectives working together." Admiral Crixtel stared at the images with growing understanding. The humans hadn't just defeated the hegemony militarily, they had made the entire concept of imperial domination obsolete by demonstrating something better. "Dr. Vasquez," she said slowly, "what exactly are you offering?" "We're offering you the chance to contribute to something greater than yourselves, Doctor," Vasquez replied. "Your species has capabilities and knowledge that could benefit everyone. But only if you're willing to share them freely, rather than use them for domination." The chamber was filled with tense silence, as the delegates considered this unprecedented situation. For the first time in their empire's history, they were being offered a choice between transformation and destruction. "I need to consult with my government," Admiral Crixtel said finally. "Of course, Doctor," Vasquez agreed. "But Admiral, I should mention that while you're deciding, 17 more hegemony worlds have requested to join the alliance. Your empire is dissolving from within, not through conquest, but through voluntary transformation." The transmission ended, leaving the War Council staring at a chamber full of holographic displays showing the scope of the changes sweeping across the galaxy. The humans had done more than redefine warfare. They had redefined civilization itself. Admiral Crixtel looked around at the assembled delegates, seeing in their faces the same realization that was dawning on her. The age of imperial conquest was ending, not with a bang, but with the simple demonstration that cooperation could achieve more than domination ever could. The humans had won the greatest victory in galactic history, not by destroying their enemies, but by showing them a better way to exist. And in doing so, they had indeed redefined war across the stars by making it unnecessary.